Alrighty, hi everyone and welcome to a new video. This video is a very nice React from good examples, understanding reconciliation, state, use effect, use memo, use callback, use ref. A lot of these things we have covered. Use ref we have never covered. We'll understand all of these things from first principles. More importantly, from real world examples. We'll take a nice example that I've invented and try to get intuition as to why these were introduced and why you should use them. A lot of these we have covered, so this might feel like a slower class. This might actually be a good prerequisite class before you dive back into week 4 and week 5 if you did not understand React until this point. We'll take it slow and understand all of these from the basics. Feel free to skip, feel free to watch this video in 2x. Let's get right into it. Let's begin with reconciliation. Let's say that you have a CA that files your taxes. Pretty common thing to do, maybe not for you because you're Garib, haha. But for most people, as you go into the real world, you have some income, you need to file taxes. A lot of times you hire a CA, a chartered accountant, to take care of your taxes. How does that whole process looks like? It looks something like this. You give him all your bank information, your PAN card, your DMAT information. They reconcile all your deposits, withdrawals, and your gains from cryptocurrencies, your gains from stock investments, and they finally tell you the final revenue, the net input, the final expense, the net output if let's say you hired other employees, and then the net profit that you made, and then you pay taxes on these profits. So what does it look like? You give your docs, a very big list of documentation, bank details, DMAT information to the chartered accountant. They spend some time reconciling your balances, and then they return you the final tax amount that you have to submit. This is very similar to how React works. When you are the developer in React, you write some state management code. You give your state to React, and React reconciles what should the DOM look like now, and then finally renders things on the DOM. The chartered accountant gives you tax returns. React renders things, reconciles and renders things on your DOM. Can you directly file your taxes? Yes. If you want to do all of that math yourself, you can. And similarly, can you directly write DOM code in a dynamic website? Yes, you can. But is it better for you to go through a CA? Probably yes, because all the heavy lifting of calculating how much income, output, 10 different things happened, this guy does very well. So it's a good idea to delegate your tax filings to a CA. Similarly, it's a good idea to delegate all your React DOM manipulation logic or DOM manipulation logic to React, so that React is the thing that's reconciling your differences and putting things on the DOM. Cool. That's a high level intro of what is reconciliation. Reconciliation is the process of taking this current state, finding the diff from the existing state, reconciling what the DOM should look like right now, and putting things on the DOM. That's what reconciliation means. Finding the actual thing that should be put on the DOM given this state. Can you do taxes yourself? Yes. Similarly, can you do DOM manipulation yourself? Yes. This is how websites were written for the longest time before React came into the picture. Maybe in the real world also, people used to file their own taxes before CA became a profession, right? So React came into the picture, and now it's a better way to write front-end code. But can you do it without React? Yes. Should you do your taxes yourself? No. Should you write DOM manipulation code yourself? Probably not. That's why the CA exists. That is why the library exists. Is it good for you to delegate heavy tasks of calculating to a CA? Yes. Is it good for you to delegate heavy tasks of calculating DOM changes to React? Probably yes. React should take care of calculating how your DOM has changed as time went by and putting that diff on the screen. What do you give to the CA? You give your bank information, your PAN card, your DMAT information, your cryptocurrency addresses. What do you give to React? You give React the state, a very big object. Ke bhai, this is what my current state looks like. Render everything else yourself. How does the CA recompute taxes? How often does the CA recompute taxes? Once a year. Here, the frequency of you interacting with the CA and them doing some work is just once a year. But in React, How often does React re-render? Anytime the state changes. Anytime you change the state in an application, which what is state we'll get to very soon. But anytime you change state, which happens very often for a dynamic website, React re-renders. Does the CA have tricks to make this calculation faster? Yes, the CA is very smart, has been doing this for years. This is their job. They did education in this. So they know what is the fastest way to calculate all the taxes and give them to you. Similarly, does React have tricks to make the calculation faster? Yes. React has been written by some really smart people. They understand that everyone has a state, everyone wants to finally put things on the DOM. They have written some really nice mathematical logic that makes re-rendering very faster. Cool. That's a real world introduction to React. Now let's look at some basic React code and understand what is this thing called the state. I've been talking about, okay, for a CA, you give them your DMAT information and your income returns, and then they calculate the taxes. For React, you give it the state. What is this state? We have discussed this a few times. In any dynamic application, for example, let's say LinkedIn, there are a bunch of posts, and as you scroll, more posts gets added to the bottom of the page. If there is a notification bar here, you see this number keep going up from 10 to 11 to 12 as time goes by and more notifications flow in. This number 10, 11, 12, this dynamic thing that changes on the screen is what's called the state. And all the posts that keep on getting added is nothing but more things being added to this global array of, let's say, posts. So what exactly is state? It is the dynamic set of things on your website. All right, that's what state is. If you look at a very basic example, which we have on screen here, I've written a React component. We've discussed this a few times. What is a component? It's just a function where we have our first state variable called count. Here I am reintroducing use state. If you don't understand it, we have discussed this a few times now. Use state is a hook. What is a hook? We did it in 5.2 or 6.2, whatever was the last video. A hook lets you manage state and describe state in your React application, which is what we are doing here. The one that we are using today is use state. And what does it let you do? Create a count variable, and it gives you a function called set count, or whatever you want to name it, that lets you update the value of this count. Once you have these two, you can return XML, not exactly HTML, XML from this function, which has, as you can see, it uses count here. Count is curly braces count. It has a button which when you click on it, it sets count to count plus 1. Now this might feel like a little extra logic. So let me rewrite this, and I would urge you to write this example yourself. Create a fresh React application. We have done it many times using Vite, and create a simple button example. I'm going to do that locally on my machine as well. npm create Vite. Oh, I'm still not sharing the wrong screen, am I? All right. I was just on this slide. I basically shared a basic example of React. I said count, set count, use state. Use state is a hook that lets you, that gives you back a count variable, which is now your state variable, and set count that lets you set this state variable and tell the CA, okay, bhai, this is updated count variable. You're basically trying to find one input to your tax return here. In the real world, what do you give your CA? You give them 10 different things: DMAT information, bank information, cryptocurrency returns, cryptocurrency addresses, some other capital gains you might have gotten. In my React code, I'm saying it's a simple website. It only has a simple button on screen, clicking on which the value goes up. So for this example, what is the dynamic thing? What is the thing that changes on the website? It is the button, which is why I have defined a simple state variable. This is how you do it. This is the syntax for it. This is array destructuring we've discussed a few times. And this is the use state hook. Once you get these values, what does this component return? It returns a div which has a button inside which I write count is the count state variable. And I say if you click on the button, set count to count plus 1. This is slightly weird syntax. So let me write this in a slightly more easier to understand way. I went to Visual Studio Code, I went to my terminal, ran npm create vite@latest, named it React app test, select React as the framework, select JavaScript as the library, and open this in Visual Studio Code. Once you open this, you have a basic React application running locally. Not running locally, you have all the code. Empty the app.css file, empty the index.css file, go to app.jsx and convert this code that you see on screen to the code we just wrote. Thankfully, the example that Vite gives you already defines this count variable. You just have to add the button on click equal to. Now this is the cleaner syntax that I'm writing, a slightly easier to understand syntax. Set count, count plus 1. Count is count. So what have I done? One more time now. Defined a state variable and returned a div which inside has a button. And if I click on the button, it will reset the state variable, which is similar to, let's say, me getting a new tax return, me getting a new capital gain from a friend, ke bhai, you sold this property, you got 40 lakhs extra, and me adding that to, giving that to my CA. Similarly, here when you're creating a dynamic website, you don't have to worry about tax returns. You have to worry about the dynamic things on your website, which in this case is this count state variable. And I set count to count plus 1. If I save this, run npm install here, once this installs, npm run dev, feel free to try this on your side as well. There we go. Now if I go to this URL, you will see I have a basic dynamic website. Harkirat, what makes this dynamic? The fact that something on the DOM is updating makes it dynamic. Harkirat, did you write the logic to update something here? No, I haven't written any such logic. So Harkirat, who is doing the actual update on the DOM? It is React, the library. I am just giving React, the library, a count state variable. React is constantly looking at it, and anytime this is changed, React understands that this div or this top level component returns this HTML, and now this count state variable has changed. So let me flush these changes onto the DOM, versus if you had to write all of this code yourself in the pre-React days, we have written this many times now, you would have had to deal with all the document.create element, document.get element by ID, all of these APIs. Now, thankfully React, not exactly React DOM more specifically, but so React deals with re-rendering things and putting them on the screen. Small detour here, I discussed this before also, but it is actually this React DOM library that actually has all the document.create element calls finally. React does not. React is very unopinionated. React is the library that can be used to write mobile apps, native apps, something else. React DOM, when used with React, makes React write things on a website. If I use React native here from React-native, then very similar code I can write here to create a mobile app. But that's a question for another day. But a good thing to know, okay, React doesn't put things on the DOM. It is this library right here. All right, let's proceed. We understand reconciliation, we understand state hopefully by now, and we understand how to create a basic React application. This is the state, and this is updating the state. This is another syntax to update the state, where you can pass in a function. The argument to the function is the current state variable value, and then you can update it. If you don't understand it, this syntax totally works as well. I'm assuming this syntax at least you understand. And when you update the state, which basically is, what are the three parts? This is the state, which is, let's say, the current bank details that I have. What is this? When I click on the button, state update, updating the bank details and giving them to the CA. Sorry, this is another bank. Or, here is another capital gain that I got from my property in Gurgaon. And then what happens when you call this? The CA recalculates the taxes, or React re-renders. What does re-rendering mean? It basically means this function gets called again. You can actually confirm that. If I put a log here, console.log, hi there from app.jsx, and let me, from this main.jsx file, remove react.strict mode. Just remove it for now. You don't have to understand what it is, but it will give you slightly weird results if you have strict mode on here. So go to main.jsx and remove react.strict mode. Once you do, save this application and refresh, and you will notice in the console you see hi there from app.jsx, which is this log right here. If I click on it again, you see it again. If I click on it again, you see it again. You keep seeing it more and more. What is happening? Anytime you change the state, app re-renders, CA recalculates the taxes. And how do you know in React re-render has happened? Either you use the React tools that we have talked about many times, and you turn on highlight update when component re-renders, and you see a box being created here. What's the issue? Oh, you need strict mode to be able to see re-renders. So let me add strict mode again. And now if I refresh, it's hard for you to see because there's another select here. But if you see, there's a box. So either this tells you a re-render has happened, a box comes around that component, or just put a log and you will see this function gets recalled anytime I click on count is 7. If I clear the console, and if I click on it again, it says hi there from app.jsx. It says it twice because React is in strict mode. But assume for now that this function gets called once, which is another way to know that a re-render has happened. The CA has done the conscious effort of recalculating your taxes and given you the result, or in this case, flushed something new onto the DOM, which is the new state variables. Count is 15, count is 16, count is 17. All right. So that's what reconciliation and re-rendering means. How do you define the re-render? This function running means the component re-rendered. If you put a log here, you see the log again and again, it means the component is re-rendering. Or as I showed you, you can see boxes if you're using the React Dev Tools, which is something we've discussed before. If you don't know, install React Dev Tools, which is a Chrome extension. This one right here. Once you add it, you will see it here. And then you will see this components and profiler section if you right click and click on inspect. And then from here, you can turn on highlights and then you're good to go. All right. Cool. We understand re-render. We understand reconciliation. We understand why React was introduced. Now, let's get into the other important hooks we discussed last week, starting with use effect. Real world example. How do you get all your docs that you need to submit to the CA? More importantly, how many times do you get the same docs? Let's say there are 10 different income sources you have. You are a rich person and you have, let's say, 3 bank accounts. You go to SBI once, you get your complete year bank, bank statement. Let's go to the iPad for this one. You have bank 1, in which you do your businesses, your salary, bank 2, bank 3. You're a rich person, remote worker. So you get multiple, you're moonlighting, you get some money here, some money here, some money here. You send some money from here to your mother to save on taxes, brother, so on and so forth. Very convoluted thing you have. Now, let's make it a little simple. Let's not keep it this convoluted. You have 3 banks in which you get income from various other, sources of income of yours. This is UP1 person. You have to now calculate the taxes. You will go to bank 1, ask for the bank statement for the year, get it back, hold it with you. Now, if you go to bank 2, get the income statement, will you now go back to bank 1? No, you already have that information once. You only need it once. You will go to this guy once, this guy once, this guy once. Have all 3 of your docs ready. Send it to your CA, or maybe incrementally keep sending it to your CA. First one came, second one came, third one came, and the CA will eventually calculate your taxes. The important thing to know here is you will not go to bank 1 twice. If you get some information from bank 2, does not mean you have to go to bank 1, get your bank details. They're still the same. You won't do this again and again, right? Then you wouldn't do the same thing in React either. We'll see how that comes. When you're filing your taxes, you might need to get your data from various sources before you can give it to your CA. These are what are called side effects. Something that does directly affect your tax returns, but it is something that is done outside the re-rendering process. It is sharing the screen again. It is you who calculates these tax returns, it is you who has to fetch all of these information, run around and get information from banks. Your CA is chilling while you do that. Your CA is like, okay, let me know, I will work for other clients, I'll do some other things. He's waiting for you to get these documents to him. You are running around, which means this is what's called a side effect. Things that are outside the rendering engine. React is the rendering engine. You give it state, it renders. Uska itna hi job hai. That's the job of React, to reconcile state and render. You have to bring state or update state or get your documentations from everywhere, and these are called side effects. Actually connecting to backends and getting data from there is what are called side effects, or even set timeout, set intervals, we discussed this last week, are all called side effects. You might have to wait for 10 days before you can talk to your bank manager. Let's say your bank is closed, or a set timeout in the JavaScript world is a side effect. You might have to go to your exchange broker's office to get your trading information. So you have to go to the office, get it back. That's also a side effect. You will update your CA with this information as you get it. I got one doc, there you go CA. I got another doc, there you go CA. Will you, in any case, do any of these more than once in a single year? No, you'll only go to the bank once. You only have to wait for 10 days once. You don't have to wait for 10 days and then 10 days again, then 10 days again, right? If you try to write a similar code in React, you will notice a problem. Let's try to first write a similar code in React. I've created a very basic example, the code for which can be found here. Let me copy over this example and paste it in my VS Code. Would urge you to do the same. Let's look at the example. Let's say you have to build a website that shows your income tax returns, and you are creating 2 state variables because you have 2 places where you gain money from. Number 1 is you have a cryptocurrency exchange data. Number 2, you have some bank data, and they are initialized to empty objects because you have to get these from various sources. You won't have them access to them immediately. These are side effects. You actually have to go somewhere, get them, and then give them to your CA, or basically update them in your state, which is similar to giving information to your CA. I write a fetch request here. I'm like, bro, एक बार तो render होता ही है. I have seen whenever an app gets mounted, one render happens, which means control will reach here, and then it will reach here. So let me put a fetch statement here, which let's say gets your data from somewhere. This is dummy data, so it won't get anything. Do you get the idea? It gets data, hits an endpoint, gets back a data, and stores that data in bank data. Let's say it is something like this. The JSON that you get back looks something like this: income:100, which basically means you've made 100 rupees or $100 this year. And secondly, I say I'm simulating the exchange, getting the exchange data with some timeout. Okay, bhai, the exchange is closed for a day or whatever, 1 second. So I will get this data. I don't have to send a fetch. You can send a fetch request if you want, but high level. After 1 second is when I get ki acha, exchange ki returns were this, which is 100 rupees I've gained on my exchange. I got my bank information. This is all dummy information, so it won't actually happen. Would urge you to eventually replace this JSON with, income:100. And then here also after 10 seconds, 1 second, I say ki chalo, let me update exchange data ki these are my returns for this year. The net income tax is bank data.income, which is, this bank data.income, which will eventually be set to 100 or should actually be returns, plus exchange data dot returns as well. This income was right. Bank data dot income plus exchange data dot returns into 0.3. Breathe in this syntax for a while, take a pause. I have tried to simulate कि हाँ, if in the real world I was to get my bank information and exchange information, it would look something like this. And I would just put the code here maybe, and then hope for the best कि चलो this will get the data and finally update the state variable, which will get re-rendered, will come in this variable and then get re-rendered. And same for this guy right here. But there is a small problem in this approach. Let's totally get rid of this fetch request maybe and replace this with another set timeout. That happens, let's say, after 3 seconds. And here I'm going to again just simulate setting up the data, the bank data, to this rather than sending a fetch request, because google.com will not respond with anything useful. All right. Simulated 2 data sources that get me some data after 1 second and 3 seconds respectively. Got the final income tax from bank data.income, exchange data.returns, which of course initially this will be undefined. So undefined into 0.3, you'll see some gibberish here. Eventually when this gets set and this gets set, you will see basically 100 plus 100 into 0.3, 30% of 200, which is how much? 60 rupees. That's your tax for this year, or $60. Let's see if that actually happens here. There might be a bug here. I haven't tested this very well. There you go. It says, hi there, your income tax returns are NAN. And then it says, hi there, your income tax returns are 60. But notice, re-renders keeps happening. Why? My hands are off. State isn't changing, but there is a lot of re-renders that are happening. Why? It's almost an infinite re-render. If you see now, there's a constant box here. Why is that happening? Can you guess? Let me give a hint. Let me put a log here. Let's see if there are actually a lot of re-renders happening. I put a log here, call it hi there re-render. Restart. Let's see. Look at the console. Look at it filling up. 18, 20, 26, 32, 36. Keeps on filling up. A lot of re-renders are happening. Why? Because when this set timeout finally triggers after 1 second, it sets the exchange data, updates the state, causes a re-render. Control reaches here. Another clock starts. And then, set exchange data happens again. And then another clock starts. Infinitely, you are getting data from the backend, or you're simulating these set timeouts again and again. And what did I say? What was I saying in the slides? I said, will you in any case do any of these more than once in a single year? No, you will calculate them only once, right? Similarly, if you write some very basic React code, right? Okay, haan bhai, this you might wait for 10 seconds before you can talk to a bank manager. You might go to an exchange broker's office and get trading information. If you just put these as such in your code base, you are basically on every render sending a fetch request again. You are re-getting data from the backend again and again when you don't have to. You only have to get this once. You only have to get this once. How do you get rid of this problem? How can I make sure that irrespective of how many times app re-renders, this code only runs once? This code only runs once. The problem, when you get either one of the data, the component re-renders, which causes both the things to trigger again. This triggers again, this triggers again. Any single state update will re-cause this to trigger and this to trigger. Then this state update will also re-cause this to trigger, this to trigger. You will infinitely keep getting data from the backend. Your app still works. You got the data the first time, this thing runs, but you're still re-rendering. You're pestering the CA again and again. Ke bhai, there you go. My tax return again. My income again. My income again. He's like, I don't need it. I only need it once. So how do you get rid of this problem? You use the use effect hook. What is the use effect hook? It has a few parts, but one of the good use cases of use effect is okay, if you want to guard some code, okay, bhai, this code only runs once when the component mounts, which means the first time this guy re-renders, I want this to run and this to run. Then I don't want it to keep running again and again. Only the first time this component renders is when I want these two code bases to run. whenever this set update happens, whenever this guy updates, could not care, does not matter how many times this function re-renders, this code only needs to run once. This code only needs to run once. Use effect lets you do it. Use effect has two parts. Whenever you put a use effect hook, the first argument is a function, which inside which you write the logic. What logic needs to run only once, or on some under some circumstances, irrespective of how many re-renders are happening. And the second argument, which is on what state variable should it run. This is a little extra. This second thing is called the dependency array. It basically states okay, when do you want this code to run. If you give it an empty array, it means you only want it to run once, which is what we want in this case. But there might be use cases कि भाई I want this logic to run when exchange data has changed, or I want this logic to run when bank data has changed. So you can put that here कि भाई the dependency array now has one dependency, let's say bank data. Anytime in any re-render, if the bank data updates, it's different from what bank data was in the last re-render, you run this code. You run it again if bank data changes. If only exchange data changes, then you don't run it. So if you add bank data as a dependency here, is when this code will run when bank data changes. But right now, what do we want? We want that bhai, this only runs once, this only runs once. So what do? We wrap both the code bases inside a use effect and we're good to go. Let's try that and see if that actually works. The first one, wrap this inside a use effect. You can write this syntax. First argument is a function. Second argument is a dependency array which is empty, and put the logic inside. What am I missing? Function की spelling गलत है. There you go. And same thing for the code below. Again, feel free to use whatever syntax you're comfortable with. You can also shove both of them inside a single use effect. कि भाई हाँ, this function only runs once and does both the things or starts both the timers. So really depends on how you want to write the code. Let's say I put it inside two different use effects. And now notice how many re-renders happen. Let me again remove strict mode so we get some real production worthy data. If I restart this application, what have I done? Wrapped the first one inside a use effect, wrapped the second code inside a use effect, all of this and all of this. Now, even though state updates from time to time, this guy will update state, this guy will update state, this code will remain guarded. It will not rerun because dependencies does not have bank data or exchange data. If I do put these as dependencies here, then yes, every time exchange data changes, this code will rerun. We will see use cases where you need that as well. But for right now we don't, so this is good enough. Save, go back here, go to localhost colon 5173, and you will notice, if you look at the console, hide the re-render, hide the re-render, hide the re-render. 3 re-renders happen. Does that make sense? The first time when the component mounted, when you see tax returns are NAN. The second time when set bank data gets called or set exchange data gets called after 1 second. The third time when set bank data gets called. Each one of these triggers a re-render, and you see this logged on the screen, and total 3 re-renders you see. Whenever a re-render happens, does not restart this clock, does not restart this clock. The existing clocks, of course, there is one clock for this and one clock for this. When the first re-render happened, when the first log came, when the first time this component got mounted, but everything after that doesn't matter how many times this function runs, how many times this re-renders, this code is guarded. This code is guarded thanks to us putting it inside a use effect. So what have we done? We have avoided asking our bank again and again, what are my tax returns? What are my tax returns for the same year? When you know you only need it once, put it inside a use effect. All right. That's what use effect is. Let's do a quick recap. We understand reconciliation, state, use effect. What do we need next? Use memo, use callback, and use ref. The things that we discussed in 6.2 last week. Let's get right into it. All right, guys, we're done with reconciliation, state, and use effect. Let's get into the use memo hook. Let's say you have all your crypto in 3 different exchanges. You are a rich person. You keep crypto in CoinDCX, WazirX, and Binance. At the end of the year, you need to get your crypto returns slash gains from all three of these exchanges. You get the returns from all three of these places, you add them up and you give them to the CA. Yes or no? Yes, sir. If the CA does not have the right, tools to calculate crypto gains, so you go to exchange one, get your net gains, let's say $500, $500, $500. You add them up, you tell your CA, okay, bhaiya, $1,500 is what I have earned in crypto gains. Please tell me the taxes on it. Now that you have given your crypto returns, accumulated crypto returns to the CA, now let's say in a day or two, you got your income report as well. Okay, bhai, this year, after my PF and all of these things, I have made 12 lakh per annum. These are all the incoming deposits into my account. Will you recalculate the sum of all of the crypto returns? You got your normal Web2 salary income reports. Does it make sense for you to go back to CoinDCX, okay, bhai, what was my crypto returns, or WazirX or Binance, and then recalculate the sum? More specifically, even if you don't go to DCX, WazirX or Binance, do you have to do the operation of 500 plus 500 plus 500 equal to 1500? Let me give this over to my CA. Do you have to do this calculation of 500 plus 500 plus 500 equal to 1500 and then giving this to the CA again if you get your income return? No, I probably don't want to do this mathematical expression, which is a simple expression, I totally get, but still, should you do this again if you get an income report, or if you get your stock returns, or if you get some other real estate return? No, these are all independent of this. Either of these and their sum does not depend on this, does not depend on this, does not depend on this. So you would calculate this once and just store it somewhere. Irrespective of what all other returns you get, you will not recalculate this. Correct? Sounds pretty right. Let's look at the same code base in a more React fashion. Let's say you have two exchanges in which you've kept your money, CoinDCX and WazirX, and a bank where you have your normal Web2 income. Okay? I have three state variables: exchange 1 data, exchange 2 data, and bank data. I have created three use effects: use effect 1, use effect 2, use effect 3. This one, again, in the real world, this would hit some Web2 backend, your exchange backend, get back some data through an API ke haan, your crypto returns for this year were 100 rupees, and then you would set it to exchange 1 data. I am just setting it immediately. When in the real world you do it, there will be some async operation. This will happen after a second or two. Same for exchange 2 data. I have hard coded it to 1000. And the third one is the bank data. Let's say these happen almost immediately, but this happens after some time. There is a set timeout here. I forgot to give it a duration, but let's say there is a duration of 5 seconds here. This and this gets set almost immediately whenever this use effect runs. Bank data gets set after 5 seconds because I will put a comma 5000 here. When bank data gets set, should you recalculate exchange 1 data dot returns plus exchange 2 data dot returns? This statement that comes after all of these effects though will run asynchronously at some point. When the render happens, it starts from the top. Initially, there is no returns here, empty object. Crypto returns would be some null plus null equal to null. Eventually, at some point, this gets set and this gets set, and crypto return become 100 plus 100. This is a expensive mathematical operation. By expensive, I mean it's hard to do. It's not hard to do. I totally get it. Summing numbers is easy, but it's still something extra that you had to do. You have to tell your computer to compute the sum of two numbers. And then you said const income tax equal to crypto returns plus bank data dot income into 0.3. This is your final income tax, and then you render that on the screen. Of course, initially you will see not a number here, null here, and then eventually you will see your final income tax after whatever the duration is, 5 seconds, 2 seconds. But the important thing to notice this line. This line reruns exchange 1 data dot return plus exchange 2 data dot returns reruns when this set timeout triggers. But it should not. Neither did this change, nor did this change. If neither of these changed, why do you need to rerun this? You don't. This is where use memo comes into the picture. Should you recompose crypto returns if only bank data has changed in a render? If during a render, which will be the render that happens after this code gets called, after let's say 5 seconds, if there is a question mark 5000 here, comma 5000 here, when this runs, should you need to rerun this or this? These two of course won't run. Use effect, empty dependency only runs once. But this line, should it rerun? Probably not. Neither has this changed, nor has this changed. Why do you need to do this mathematical logic again? You don't. Which is where use memo comes into the picture. कि you say कि भाई crypto returns equal to, ये गलत है. This should be use memo, not use callback. Crypto returns equal to use memo, and inside you pass a function कि भाई this is an extremely expensive operation. Do it once and then. This is a dependency array. This is also incorrect. Totally incorrect hai bhai. Let me fix this in action. Let's try to basically ignore this slide. Let's try to fix this together. This is the code that we already have. It's present on the gist. This is code which does not use memo. Let's introduce use memo here and see how things go. Let's copy over this code. Let's go here and copy. Let's paste it in Visual Studio Code. Take your time and paste your code here. Let's look at the code from top to bottom. Exchange 1 data, exchange 2 data, bank data, an effect that sets exchange 1 data, an effect that sets exchange 2 data, and a set timeout, which, as I said, let's add a duration of 5000 seconds or 5000 milliseconds or 5 seconds here. Sets bank data, crypto returns gets calculated, income return gets calculated, and then you render it on the screen. Look at these two, basically does nothing. Adds the data from all the exchanges to create a crypto returns variable. And this guy says, very crypto returns. This is your crypto gains for the year plus your income for the year into 0.3 because 30% is the standard tax slab in India. Mota mota is your net income tax, and then you render that on the screen. Let's save it. Let's run it and see if it actually works as expected or not. First, it says NAN, and after 5 seconds, it says 90, which makes sense because what are your net gains? 100 plus 100 plus 100, 300, and what's 30% of 300? It's 90. What is the problem? The problem is the final render that happens. This code runs when that happens. Let's put a console.log hi there before and then hi there after. Okay, I've added 2 statements above and below this specific expression calculator, this specific expensive operation. And now if I run the code, you will see after 5 seconds, it kept on running, but let me clear the console. And after 5 seconds, hi there before ran, hi there after ran. If you want to go a little more fancy, you can go to your sources tab here, search for command P to search app.tsx or JSX, sorry, or you can also, navigate to app.gsx from the side and put what's called a breakpoint here, which basically means by anytime the control reaches here, I want the control to stop. Control to stop basically means the code will stop executing. It will get stuck here and you will have to actually click a button for the code to resume. This is a very fancy Chrome developer tool thing which you will eventually get to. But if you want to try, or even if you don't want to try, if you want to look at it, feel free to look. Refresh. First render happens, control reaches here. As you can see, it's stuck. It says paused in debugger. If I click on this button is when it will continue. Click on it, continues. Another render happened. Why? Because these two exchange 2 data is getting set, exchange 1 data is getting set. So those re-renders are happening. Now after, this happened very quickly, so let me try that one more time. Pressed, and now after 5 seconds, control reaches here again, which means this line is running again after 5 seconds, which is not great. We want this to be memoized. Why? Because neither has this changed in this render, nor has this changed. Only bank data has changed. This is this specific function call or set state call. So this code shouldn't run ideally, but right now it is after 5 seconds. How do you fix it? You say, bhaiya, crypto returns equal to use memo. First argument is a function. Second argument is a dependency array. function returns कि भाई exchange1 data dot returns plus exchange2 data dot returns is what should be stored here, and only rerun this if either exchange1 data has changed or exchange2 data has changed. Only if either one of these have changed should this logic run, else it shouldn't. And let me remove the logs and put them inside as well. This will tell us whether or not this code actually runs, when this code actually runs. The hi there before, hi there after will not run because we will return right here. But if hi there before runs, then we know कि हाँ भाई, if this line ran, then this line also ran. But if this line does not run, that means this execution was skipped for that render. And what do we want? We want if set bank data is ever called, if only this thing changes between two renders, then this logic does not run. This expensive operation of computing the sum does not run. All right. Let's see that in action now. By the way, this will give you a lot of pain if you don't clear your debugger, so feel free to. The thing that we put here, click on it again to remove it, else whenever you open the console, you'll be in a very stuck state from time to time. Okay? Let me put the debugger again here. Let me not put it here. Let's first just focus on logs. Refresh. NAN, I see a few logs. Let me clear all the logs. Let's see after 5 seconds what happens. It says 90 here. And if you look at the code, there was a hi there before here. This did not get logged. What does that tell you? In this final render that happened after 5 seconds, control never reached here, which means this guy has the cached value, which is fine. It can have the cached value because neither has this changed nor has this changed. Neither of the dependencies changed. So it can totally ignore running this. It can remember, acha, last render make crypto returns was this. It will be the same. I'm going to ignore running this. That is what use memo helps you with. If you look at it in the end, both use effect and use memo let you skip executing some logic between re-renders based on the dependency array. है कि नहीं? This guy says कि भाई no dependency, I will only run it once. If exchange1 data changes, I will run it. If exchange2 data changes, I will run it. Else I won't run it. But what is the difference? This doesn't return you anything. You cannot be like const x equal to this. But here you can. So that's the difference between use effect and use state. In the end, both guard running some code base based on a dependency array. Why is this good? Performance benefits. Here it was कि भाई नहीं तो infinitely you'll do these things. Here it was if neither of these has changed, don't need to rerun it. All right. That's use memo. If you want to try this with breakpoints, you can as well. So go back here, go to sources, command P to open this, search for app.jsx and put a breakpoint here. Okay, bhai, when does this run? Refresh, ran once, ran twice, after 5 seconds, did not run. Control never reached here. In fact, if you put one here and here, you will see control reaches here. Control reaches here, but it skips this part. Let me show that to you really quickly. Hands up. Control reached this line. Okay, bhai, should I calculate this or not? Completely skipped this and moved directly here. So that's how use memo lets you save some computation between re-renders. In the end, you want to minimize the number of things that you want your CA to do, right? You don't want to do things again and again. That is what use memo lets you do here. All right. That's use memo. We're left with 2 more. Again, this code was a little wrong, so let me fix that in the slides as well. This is the right code. There we go. Alrighty, moving on. We're done with use memo as well. We're off to use callback now. Use callback, thankfully, number 1 isn't used too much. Number 2 doesn't provide you a lot of benefits. If you ever want to memoize a function, we use callbacks. That's the only difference between use callback and use memo. In fact, in the last class, someone asked also, okay, Harkirat, first let's understand what use callback is, and then we will see okay, you don't really need use callback. Whatever use callback provides you, you can actually do just with use memo as well. But let's say in our original code, I tell you, okay, this needs to be a function called calculate crypto returns. You can write this syntax, you can write a different syntax, you can be like function. This works as well. There was a typo, but this would work as well. This works, or this works as well. Both of these are fine. Now that you have written this guy needs to return exchange one data dot returns plus two data dot returns. All right, let's say you define a function like this, and यहाँ पे I do calculate crypto returns plus bank data dot income into 0.3. ठीक है, no real difference, no use effect, no use memo, no use callback, nothing. Simple, straightforward. Rather than putting it in a variable, I put it in a function. Now I call this function and do this. Now what will happen across re-renders? Harkirat, same thing will happen. Across re-renders, this will get called again, control will reach here again. Yes, that is fine. This part, use callback, is not about minimizing how often this is run. Use callback is about not rendering a child if the function doesn't need to change across renders. Go through this a few times. What does it say? Use callback is not let me make this slightly better. Use callback is not about minimizing the amount of code that is run. Use callback is about not rendering a child component if the function doesn't need to change across renders. For example, if you look at this function, what will this function be after this has rendered and this has rendered? It will be return 100 plus 100, right? After both of these have rendered, this value becomes 100, this value becomes 100. It will become const calculate returns equal to function return 100 plus 100. Now, let's say you pass this function down to a child component. Let me call it child. This one might feel a little confusing, but bear with me for some time here. Calculate crypto returns equal to calculate crypto returns. And this guy says your crypto returns are this. Okay? Simple, straightforward. The child accepts a function as an argument, right? Forget this income tax. Forget we're not worried about income tax anymore. We are worried about crypto gains tax, all right? Or how much crypto have you gained in the year? We pass that to this child component. We can also call it crypto gains calculator component. And we say, bro, this is a function. Call it if you want to. It will return you the crypto gains for the year. Let's see how this looks like on the website. Your crypto returns are 200. Cool, Harkirat, straightforward, works. Notice there is a problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I would have expected a re-render. Let me put a log in here. Console.log crypto child re-rendered. All right. I've put this log here. I want to see after 5 seconds, when I reset the bank data and this component re-renders, does this child re-render as well? What do you think the answer is? We have discussed this a few times. Let's look at the console. Let me clear this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it says crypto child re-rendered. I discussed this a few times with you. Okay, if there is a parent component that re-renders, all of its child components also re-render. Uska children also will re-render. Uska child will also re-render. If a parent component re-renders, this will also re-render, this will re-render, this will re-render, irrespective of if the props here have changed. Does not matter if the thing that you're passing in as props have changed. If this re-renders as well. In fact, there could be like a dummy component here, which pretty much does nothing. Simply returns, a high. And if I render dummy here, even this dummy will re-render, even though it's not even accepting anything as an input. So how, if this guy re-renders, why do you re-render? Something has changed, state has changed, something new needs to be put here somewhere. But this guy isn't even accepting anything as an input. Yet it will re-render. Oh, sorry, wrong screen again. Haha. Repeating. I said, even if there is a dummy component here, which does not accept any inputs, and if I call it here or render it here, if the parent re-renders, dummy also re-renders. Dummy does not re-render, does not re-render. Dummy also re-renders, even though it isn't even accepting a state variable as an input, which means it's pretty much static, right? It will always have high here. There is no need for you to re-render it. But this is how React works. React is like, if there is ever a parent component, which has like, let's say two children, which has two children, you can keep going down level by level. This guy re-renders means this all re-render. If just this guy re-renders, then both this and this will re-render. This is true until we introduce what? We introduce memo, which is different from use memo. They are both significantly different. What was use memo? It was a hook that would make sure a certain code base only runs if some dependencies have changed in a re-render. What is memo? Memo lets you skip re-rendering a component when its props are unchanged. What is happening here? Component is re-rendering even though its props haven't changed across re-renders. This doesn't even accept a prop. And same for this guy. This guy is just taking a function as an input. Functions don't change, it's the same function rate, theoretically. Then even this shouldn't re-render or this shouldn't re-render as long as I'm using memo, which is different from use memo. Harkirat, how do you use memo? You have to import memo from React. Again, this and this is significantly different. Once you import memo, you can be like const dummy equal to memo function, which means only re-render this function if an input to the function changes, which for dummy it will never happen, which means it only renders once. And for this guy, I can be like const this thing equal to memo function and this should only re-render when the input function changes. There is just one prop here, which is the function. If they had multiple props, then this would re-render only when these props change. We have now removed the constraint कि हाँ भाई, if the parent renders, child will re-render as well. We have said, does not matter if the parent renders. If a prop that is being passed in changes, then this will re-render. If a prop that is being passed in does not change, then this will not re-render. Cool. That is what memo lets you do. Now let's see, has this crypto gains calculator, does this re-render after 5 seconds or not? Because after 5 seconds, what is happening? This. Let me remove the dummy component completely. If you look at the code base, what is happening? Exchange 1 data gets set after some seconds. Exchange 2 data gets set not after some seconds, immediately. Both of these happen immediately. This happens after 5 seconds. What do we want? We want ke bhai, after 5 seconds, this function pretty much looks the same. Does not change between re-renders, specifically the last re-render. And so this should not re-render, bhai. The function that's going in is the same. This should not re-render after 5 seconds. Because we have memo here. So let's see if that happens or not. Refresh. Clear the console. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it says crypto child re-rendered. Why did this re-render, even though the input that we're sending in looks the same, hasn't really changed across re-renders? Or has it? If you ever define a function like this across re-renders, it will change. Why? Because how does React know कि भाई something has changed? It will just be like, हाँ पहले calculate crypto returns was something, now it is this. Let me see if LHS equal to RHS. And if I go to my console here and if I write function A, which does a console.log hi, and then function B, which also does the exact same thing. And if I do A equal to B, it says false, even though the functions are exactly the same. It says why they are not equal, because they are referentially not equal. Compare it to if I do const x equal to 1, const y equal to 1. If I do x equal to y, it says true. But functions are never equal even if their body is the same. So that is why React does not understand कि हाँ भाई this hasn't changed across re-renders. And this is where use callback comes into the picture. Use callback says कि भाई if you do want to tell me कि भाई function hasn't changed across re-renders, please wrap that function inside a use callback. Give me the dependencies कि हाँ भाई when either exchange1 data changes or exchange2 data changes is when this function will actually change, because you know this function does depend on exchange1 data and exchange2 data. But if bank data changes, then this function doesn't need to change. It can referentially be the same as the function before across re-renders. This is the benefit of using use callback. Notice this will store a function which will still get called. When we were using use memo, the thing on the left got a value, but if you use callback, the thing on the left gets this function, only it referentially changes if this or this changes, if the dependencies change, else it does not referentially change. So it actually gives you the benefit of not re-rendering a child if the function that is defined here, a dependency of that function hasn't changed, which exactly is exactly what happens after 5 seconds here. Set bank data changes, this and this don't change, so this should not change, and so this should not re-render. Let's see if that happens. Refresh. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 time has passed, and yet the child component did not re-render. It still looks good, still has the right value, and everything is working as expected. Cool. When does this become a problem? If you start to remove these dependencies is when it will become a problem. You have to make sure whatever the function has inside, you pass that in as a dependency, else you will see problems in your code. Most probably I can actually just show you. See, it says your crypto returns are NAN because it does not rerun this code, or does not rerun this code, does not change the function when exchange1 data actually gets set, or when exchange2 data actually gets set. So it remains, null plus null, or nan plus nan, which remains nan. Nan stands for not a number. Don't worry about what it is. Basically a null value. If I just add exchange1 data here, then it says 200. If I just add exchange2 data here, there is a way to make it 100 as well if you just have one and not the other, but take it chodo. If just one of them renders and the other does not, but they're happening very quickly, take it chodo. Hope high level you understand what use callback does, and how it saves you a child re-render if the dependencies of whatever the function is using do not change. That's use callback. And lastly, we have use ref, which is something we haven't at all discussed until this point, neither in week 6.2, not today, not before that. Let's understand this other hook that's important in 2 use cases. We'll understand one of the use cases right now. We can get to the other one. Other one isn't super important, but also important. The most important use case of use ref is it lets you basically get access to DOM elements. If you might remember, the way we have been accessing DOM elements is how? Document.get element by ID. This is how we've been accessing DOM elements. React has a slightly easier way of doing that. And why do you need DOM element access at all, Harkirat? We will see. The assignment sort of covers that, whatever is the assignment for this week. All right, let's begin with use ref. Let's say you want to do some tax evasion. We're getting into the juicy bits now. You want to override what your CA has calculated as your income tax. Don't do it, but let's say you want to. How would you do it? How would you report an incorrect value to the government? Or more specifically, how would you, if you ever have, something rendered on the screen, how can you overwrite what React has written and put something else there? We'll see. This is the code base for doing that exactly. Let's say it's a pretty simple one. Ignore this div ref, ignore this as well. Let's say there is a const income tax equal to 20,000. You can also create a state variable if you want. Either is fine. You can put it at the top as well. That is fine as well. And then I say, return, hi there, your income tax returns are this. Of course, in the real world, you would have a bunch of use effects that actually get your data from exchanges, from your income reports, so on and so forth. Let's say all of that is there. Assume all of that is there. Finally, the income tax value is this. And this is what your CA renders on the screen and puts on the DOM, or in this case, React does. You want to override it. Okay, bhai, no, my income tax returns are 100,000. How will you do it? You can either do the, let me show you how you do it. Let's copy this code base. You can either do something like this. The easiest way to do it is this. ID equal to income tax container, and then after 5 seconds you can do document.get by ID income tax container dot inner HTML equal to 10. Let's say you want to decrease this from this to this and override what React gave you. What can you do? You can be like, okay, bhai, this code run once, no dependency. After 5 seconds, please override the inner HTML of this div to be 10. Simple, straightforward. We've done many times. How we did DOM manipulation up until React. Should you do this? No. But let's say you have to override what React does. Ideally, you should never. You should just worry about the state, update the state, then React itself will, put it various places. But let's say you don't do that. Again, this is not the right way to do state. Ideally, this should be something like this. Set income tax. Either is fine. We're just taking an example here. We want access to the DOM element. And this is one way of getting it. If I look at it, feel free to go back and pause as well. It has 20,000 and after 5 seconds, it becomes 10. You have overridden React. Is it a good practice? No. Why is not a good practice, Kirat? Because you're confusing React a little bit. React still feels there is 20,000 here because that's what it put there, and now you've changed it a bit. But let's say this is a use case you have to support. This is one way of doing it. What is the other way of doing it? It is the original code that was there, which basically says, okay, bhai, const get a ref or a reference to this div. What can you do? You can be like, excuse me, const div ref equal to use ref. Notice how this does not need two values. It's just a single value. Const div ref, or whatever you want to name it, equal to use reference, which is another hook. What is use state? It is a hook. What is use effect? It is a hook. Use ref is another hook, which you can use to get reference to DOM elements. How can you do it? Rather than doing ID equal to something, you can be like ref equal to div ref. Cool. You can be like div ref equal to div ref. Okay, bhai, this div ref variable that I defined on the top will contain the reference to this div. And here I can simply be like div ref dot current dot inner HTML equal to 10. Why current, Harkirat? Because ref dot current is how you get access to the current reference of that specific div, which is why whenever you're accessing a ref, you have to do a div ref dot current. If you log this on the screen, you will see it's the actual DOM element. And you can see this is how this is cool. This is like much better than what we had a while back, which was like the whole document.get element by ID, put the ID here. There are a bunch of other reasons why that is bad. This is slightly more cleaner. If I now refresh this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it updates. And as you can see, it logs the actual DOM element here as well, which means div ref.current actually contains the real DOM element. Cool. That's what useRef lets you do. As I said, it lets you do two things. This is one of the things it lets you do. The other thing it lets you do is it lets you, maintain a variable across re-renders, but we can get to it when we get to it. This is the most important use case. And if you go back to the assignments for this week, you will see some slightly better use cases for useRef. So you should try to solve this and this. I will also be releasing a video very soon where I cover all the assignments for this week. So you'll be able to understand it better from there as well. But try to do it yourself. If you have this code, if you understand this code, you should be easily be able to solve this and this assignment if you know some DOM APIs. So try to do this yourselves. All right. That's all for this one. I will see you guys in the next one where I'm actually solving some assignments. Bye bye.